Case lawyer's not any good.
Good morning. We're going to get started here. The first thing we're going to do is prayer, and John Gross going to say a prayer.
Good morning. It's great to see so many people here on a beautiful day. So let's take time, bow our heads, and we'll pray to our God. Lord, you are one true God. You are faithful to us. You are sovereign in all things. We thank you for this opportunity to gather together today to celebrate the lives and the actions of those in the past. We thank you for the food that we have today. We thank you that the Bronstein Foundation supports this, provides this presentation. Please guide us in all that we do. And we ask that we open our hearts to you, and that with Larry's presentation, that we will find out things about our past and look forward to the future. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll use this flag. Please join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing for, and join me in singing our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the thirsty men, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Take your seat. Good morning. Thank you for coming today. We've got Larry Heck's going to give us a talk about something that I think a lot of you won't know much about. I sure didn't know anything about it, but Mr. Mike Dean and Mr. Lloyd Brinker told me about some of the things, and I was studying it for the last 5 years. I think you'll really enjoy what Larry's got to say. I'm going to stand over here by a gentleman here. You stand up here. Stand up here. This young man still cuts his own lawn. He's only 101 years old. And he was at the Hump, where Larry's going to talk about. He was over in India, Chawa, and then over in Kumain. And he was a radio man there. His name is Herb Levine, and we're lucky to have him. And he's got his picture over in our exhibit on the Hump. So if you've got questions, I don't want Herb to leave till 5 o'clock because all you're going to be asking questions. You're not going to get a chance to ask somebody questions after Larry educates you. So this is Herb Levine, and he'll be around for a while. He only charges $10 for cutting the lawn, so you might ask him to cut your lawn. The other person I'm going to stand by right here, you two stand up, please. This is Mr. Michael Dean, and this lady, pretty lady with him, is Carol Brinker Dean. Her dad was Lloyd Brinker, and he flew the Hump. He flew 68 missions in a C-46. This place is called Aluminum Alley because you're lost there. The wind's there. Even Bill Shin wouldn't like to fly there, or Mr. Eckmeyer wouldn't like some of the winds were as high as 140 miles an hour, and Larry will tell you about it. Her daddy did that. We interviewed him, and we will have his interview on YouTube. We lost him when he was 94, about 3 or 4 years ago. But if you got questions, ask them. They both know a lot of things about the Hump as well. So after this is over, I don't want them to leave until 5 o'clock either. The only person we don't have today is Sally Carson Becker. I called her and the phone's about like my wife. It doesn't answer. But anyway, she is Ellis Carson's daughter. That's William Carson's granddaughter. And Ellis Carson was in charge of Sunbeam Plastics here, Sunbeam Electric. It was right here on the airport property. And we were lucky to get the Carson estate has given us some things, his donations. We also have his pictures in there. He was a flyboy. His wife also flew, and he was very instrumental in doing a lot of things for flying in Evansville. All his models, which he had probably he was probably the #1 model collector in the United States. And some of these models are here somewhere at the Evansville Museum. And that's Sally Becker Carson, or Sally Carson Becker couldn't make it. So the only thing I Larry to get up here, because I gave him a time limit. Larry goes to Holy Redeemer, and we got half a Holy Redeemer here. But this Holy Redeemer doesn't know that we're moving Larry to St. Benedict's as a choir director. We've already recruited him, so he couldn't sing today because he got to talk. This museum is growing, and when we grow, we have a lot of programs. We're educating 900 students this summer. We've already had 300 so far, 900. Mrs. Nancy Sanderson and also Stephanie Pictures are spearheading that along with Bruce Green. They're unbelievable. They're going to the level of the kids. And this summer, also Homer back there, she also has helped. But they're spearheading this. It's unbelievable what these kids walk out of here with. We have Memorial High School students. We've had so many different schools already, a lot of younger kids. So because of that, we're using a lot of volunteers. So we'd love to get your red shirt. We can use volunteers in our archive, as a docent, and any type of things mechanical. Mr. Heil and Mr. Kanzer are helping us do all kinds of mechanical work here. So no further ado, in 2 weeks we have another talk. And what's on the list for 2 weeks from now, I forgot to look. It's a good one. Who? The WASP. W-A-S-P. So a WASP, the women like to know about, there were 1,800 women trained in World War II to be ferry pilots. They would take these planes from Major and send them to Lawrenceville and other places. 1,800 were trained, 1,300 passed the course. There's very few left. But Donna Bowles will talk about how the WASPs were so crucial, because all the men were in uniform and trying to shoot planes down, where these ladies flew the planes and they were excellent pilots. That's what the talk is about in 2 weeks. So love to have you. Try to email my wife or call her or text her. Okay, Larry, here you go. Larry's a super volunteer here. He's done everything. He is the backbone of a lot of things. He's here every Saturday. He does all kinds of things. I can't compliment Larry enough.
I just wanted to say, Jennifer starts getting me beat on Dr. Brown and Kathy. All right, I'm going to see my...
They get 48 minutes.
Damn, only gave me 37.
You get that right room, 2 inches away. Pick up, step forward.
Okay, we're talking about the hump. How many people have any idea what that is? A lot of people are asking questions. There's a lot of hands up. When you're actually looking at part of the hump in this photograph, it's the mountains that lie between India and China. It's the southeastern extension of the Himalayas. And we're going to talk about it. Okay, prologue. In 19, whoops, I touched the wrong thing. Okay, in 1931, the Japanese already got into Manchuria because of the Depression. They were going there to seize raw materials. World War II begins in 1937 for China. The Chinese Nationalist forces were under Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. Remember him? In 1940, the Japanese have closed all the ports in China. There's no way into China except through Rangoon. So, 200,000 Chinese and Burmese laborers built the Burma Road, which you see in this picture. The Burma Road ran from Rangoon up to Lashio. I mean, the railroad went from Rangoon to Lashio. Then, by truck on this road that the laborers built, they would take supplies into Kunming and all the way to the capital of China. That picture you see of all those curves is not on the actual Burma Road, it's on a road connected to it. There's 23 turns there. All the commodities will come in through Rangoon, go up through the railroad, and over the Burma Road to China. 1942 is the beginning of what would become the Hump. What you see here is a picture of the Japanese attacks in Burma. The Japanese started attacking in 1942. By March 9th, they had captured Rangoon, which they destroyed. It was a primary entry port to China. By May 8th, the Japanese have seized Richinaw. That's on the right side of the little bar, the Richinaw in Burma. There was an airfield there, and the Japanese seized that. They can now threaten Hump plots with the Japanese fighters are based there. The initial U.S. Hump flight is April 8, 1942. Colonel William Olds used two former Pan Am DC-3s. They loaded them with 8,000 gallons of aviation fuel and 500 gallons of lubricants. They were supplying, thought they were supplying, the Doolittle Raiders bombers. However, the Doolittle Raiders bombers never made it to the places in China they were supposed to. But later, Jimmy Doolittle actually did hop a ride over the Hump when he came back. This is a map of the area where we saw it. You can see the lay of the land. There's the Himalaya along the top of the picture there. The river you see flowing through the Assam Valley is the Brahmaputra River, a huge river, sometimes over a mile wide. And up there on the right side, you see air bases, Moenberry, Chabua, Dinjan, and Sukarati. The red, marked in red is Chabua, that was headquarters for the U.S. White is Dinjan, that's the British base. And you can see over here, Mount Everest is off the picture to the left. February 25th, FDR permits to provide 10 C-53 Skymasters to Chinese National Aviation Corporation. That brings their fleet to 25 planes. The C-53 is a troop carrier version of the C-47 or DC-3. Load capacity 6,000 pounds. Ceiling is 22,500 feet. In the summer of 42, you had doldrums. You had the monsoon season runs from May to October. The transport activities slowed down to a trickle. The monsoon kept them from hardening runways at Moenberry and Sukarati. The only hard service runways were at Chabua and Dinjan. All missions had to be flown out of those bases. Chabua was full, and so was Dinjan because the British completely filled that airport. On October 25th, this is right at the end of the monsoon season, the Japanese launched a attack that they've been waiting for. 100 bombers and Zeros attacked Dinjan and Chabua airfields. They destroyed or heavily damaged 9 transports and 25 airplanes. Sukarati was attacked on the 26th, and Chabua was attacked on the 28th. Both of those attacks were very negligible. Air Transport Command, India China Wing. On December 1st, 1942, the Army Air Force Air Transport Command takes over command and operations of the Hump. It consolidates the equipment and personnel from the 10th Air Force Ferry Command
which had originally been in charge. Solved the problem of diversion of aircraft to combat missions by removing them from control of the theater commander. Those two patches you see on the right side of the screen, the top one is the Air Transport Command patch, and the bottom one is a theater-made patch made in India, for the India-China wing of the Air Transport Command. December of 42, C-87 cargo versions of B-24 started arriving to use on the Hump. C-87 had no guns or bomb rack and also been likely to carry cargo. Heavier load capacity than the C-47 is 8,000 pounds, has a higher ceiling. This is very important, 28,000 feet. It had the reliability of 4 engines, but it's a very difficult plane to fly. You'll fly really hard. Whoops. Go back. The first year starts slow. Logistics and command problems prevented the Hump airlift operations from meeting almost all their goals. Only C-47 aircraft flew in sporadic service because they needed spares and parts we couldn't get their parts there. There was a lack of manpower and fleet was operating at low efficiency. In December, the tonnage finally exceeded 1,000 tons, reaching 1,227 tons. Shanghai checks wants 5,000 tons a month. The monsoon season that started in May and lasted through the summer prevented the use of the field, as we talked about, didn't have hard services. They also only flew at daylight and good weather. This is the classic Hump. This is the high Hump. Airplanes take off from Lido and Chabua up here on the upper left and fly to Kunming, which is the main terminal in China. They're flying over mountains and 4 river valleys. Here's the growing pace. Things are still going slow in 1943. January, we only carried 1,263 tons. By July, it's only up to 3,451 tons. We're still shooting for 5,000. By now, Shanghai Shek probably wanted 10,000. You look at these pictures, you see Chinese workers over there breaking the big rocks into medium-sized rocks into small rocks, and then carrying the small rocks to make runways and baskets at runway. There's a picture of a very large roller in the center picture that weighs 10,000 pounds, and the upper picture shows a whole line of Chinese laborers pulling that roller to level a runway, all by command. The consolidated C-109. You can see on the lower right hand, I've got a nickname, C-102. I had a red frame around it. It was a tanker version of the B-24 that had bladder tanks installed in it. It was designed to carry aviation gasoline over the Hump. It was unstable, and many of them crashed at a fireball or exploded in flight. Load capacity was 2,036 gallons, but usually they were flying at about 1,200 gallons once they realized how dangerous it was. Ceiling, just like this C-87, 28,000 feet. 209 C-109 aircraft produced most went to fly the Hump. Of those, 80 of them crashed. Gene Autry served as a co-pilot. Let me back up. Gene Autry was a co-pilot on the C-109, and he's quoted saying, "It was a thrill that laughed for life." The C-46 Commando arrives on the Hump. It would be the workhorse of the Hump. You heard other people talking about flying the C-46. It was a work in progress. It was a new aircraft rushed into service. It required more than 100 tech changes that were made in the field. Load capacity, 15,000 pounds, much higher than the other aircraft. Ceiling is 24,500, and that is an honest ceiling. The Curtis engineers flew on Hump lights to make notes for those changes. It's much larger than the C-47 you can see in this picture. It's a C-47 on your left, C-46 on the right. I tried to gauge these slides by looking at the size of the soldiers' legs and stuff, so I have it the same scale, so you can see the difference in the two aircraft. How many of you remember Eric Severine, CBS news correspondent? Few people. At this time, Eric Severine is a 30-year-old war correspondent. He's one of Edward R. Boy's boys. And he traveled over to the Hump, a party that was going to China to investigate how well Chiang Kai-shek was using what we sent. 21 of them had to bail out an aircraft when there was a problem on the aircraft. They parachute, a later medical team came parachuted to them, and they led them all out 25 days, 125 miles. The co-pilot never got out of the aircraft and crashed. It was the largest single emergency bailout in history, probably still remains to be there. Things like that's what started search and rescue. There was never search and rescue until the Hump. The Hump is when search and rescue operations started. They were led by the name of Captain Blackie Porter. They operated C-47s and B-25. They would fly over the jungle once they knew where Rex was going down trying to find their crew. If they located them, the downflyers would parachute to them, or they would drop them supplies. Captain Porter was killed in December of 43 when his B-25 was attacked by Japanese U-boats. In February 45, they established the search and rescue party at Moenbury Air Force Base. This was the first Army unit to ever use helicopters for search and rescue. This is Tom Harden. He became commander in September 1943. He introduced round-the-clock flying. He said airplanes don't need to sleep. He also said, from this point forward, there is no weather over the Hump. The tonnage went up, but accidents went down. Life colorfully described him as the tyrannical and colorful commander of the Hump flyers. He's promoted to general in 1944. Whoops. Chapel Army Air Base was the central base for the U.S. forces. This for all flights going over the Hump. They didn't all have to take off at that field. There were 4 or 5 fields in that general area. This is a picture of the base. If you look up to the top of that picture, there's a white stripe across the slide. That is the Brahmaputra River. And if you look above that, through the clouds, you can see the Himalayas back there. On the left side is part of the base where they're staging aircraft. It served as a headquarters, I think I mentioned that. Charlie Hick, that was me, my dad. Charles Thaddeus Hick enlisted in the Army prior to Pearl Harbor. He entered at Fort Benjamin in Harrison and then was sent to California for training. You see him by the palm tree there in his uniform. But after he was in the Army for 2 years, he traveled to India on a troop ship. This is the U.S. Army Transport George Washington. There were 7,500 soldiers on that ship. They had 2 uniforms, and to clean, they hosed them down with salt water on the deck. This is where he was headed, Moenbury Army Air Base, where you see the little yellow arrow. There's also Tatawa, Dinjan, Sukarati, and Jorhat down here was a later field. Those were all hunts of the field. That's a picture of the tower at Moenbury Air Base in 1944. Life in the Moenbury was pretty austere. Troops lived in bosses, which were little huts made of bamboo and cane by the local natives. They slept in mosquito nets, they purified their water with iodine tablets, and lived on packaged sea rations that did not go to town because of sanitary reasons to eat local food. During the monsoon season, everything mildewed and mud was everywhere. It looks like he's holding an OD beer can. GIs drinking out of cans during the war made it acceptable after the war for all of us to drink our beer straight from the can. This is Duberdorf. This was the city closest to Moenbury and Chapel Field. The city was located on the shores of the Brahmaputra River in Yasen Valley. Troops would sometimes get to visit and experience the local culture and buy souvenirs. I think this is where my dad probably bought some ivory bracelets for souvenirs for my mom and an opal ring. 1943 brings some success. The India-China League increases their personnel from 2,500 to almost 1,100 by December. The fleet of aircraft grows to over 230 aircraft. In December, the wing sets a new tonnage record, exceeding 10,000 tons for the first time. FDR had been calling for that for 6 months. They delivered 12,590 tons. However, between June and December, there were 135 major accidents with 168 fatalities. Presidential citation. The India-China wing exceeded FDR's monthly goal of 10,000 in December. So President Roosevelt awards the entire India-China wing the Presidential Unit Citation. This is the first time that award was ever presented to a non-combat unit. You can see the medal there showing where it is on my dad's uniform, and you can come up here later and take a look at the actual thing. That was C-54 Skymaster, DC-4. This was the military version of the DC-4. It's a 4-engine aircraft. Can carry a much heavier load, 32,500 pounds. But it has a lower ceiling, 22,300. It will not be able to fly over the high hump ground. There's more than one way to load the C-46 in India. Combat cargo. In September, combat cargo units started transporting supplies and reinforcements to units in Impal, Burma. There was a big battle going on there. They continued to support Allied operations in Burma, flying men and supplies from India. They even dropped dummy cargoes to lure the enemy away from our troops. We interviewed Roland Gardner once, my son and I. He said, combat cargo is flying a C-47 at treetop level, kicking cargo out the door while people shoot at you. There were CDI didn't have USO quotas by the middle of '94. This is one my dad went to. The star was Paulette Goddard, movie star. You can see some other folks in the picture with you there, including General Stilwell, who was head of that whole theater. If you look closely at that one rupee note on the screen, the one on the left has Paulette Goddard's signature. The one on the right is signed by actor Bill Gardner, Andy Arcari, who is an accordionist, and Keenan Wynn, which we all know. Dueling offenses is important for them. The Japanese were trying to stop the hump activity, so they sent troops up, this is on the right side of the picture, to try to break into Denonpur and cut the rail line that connects the Assam Valley to the Pacific Break, so that would shut the operation down. On the right, we're talking about Joe Stilwell sending forces like Merrill's Marauders and the Chinese Army to force their way down to Michigan. Remember, the Japanese took Michigan and put fighters there. They're going to drive the Japanese out, and that would end the Japanese threat. As far as the Battle of Kohima and Dinjan, most of the Japanese soldiers came to a halt there after 2 months of fighting because they were starving to death. The Japanese couldn't get supplies to them. Okay, you're on. This is LORAN, long-range navigation. In 1944, the newly developed LORAN radio navigation system was deployed on hump routes. LORAN receiver-equipped aircraft could determine their position utilizing timing between 2 radio signals. Earl Line of Evansville was deployed in CDI to operate LORAN transmitting stations on both sides of the hump. Okay, if I missed a slide, we talked about Lloyd Brinker, but I have his flights listed as 85 flights. That's what I got out of the information in the museum here. On the left side is Lloyd Brinker, who was a pilot that flew C-46s over the hump. On the right is Ellis Carson, a hump pilot who also flew C-46s and was one of the founders of Sunbeam's Plastics. In 1944, this is what the freight delivery looked like. In early 44, they were maybe getting 15,000 tons. That was a slight drop, but by November, we're close to 40,000 tons a month. 1945, we're going to maximum effort. General Turner's cranking things up. This is a C-54 preparing to take off on the hump route. Since the Japanese have been driven out of Michinoku, they can now fly the low hump all the way. We start in Calcutta and come in. This is the span of the ATC freight lines in CBI, China, Burma, I keep saying CBI, China, Burma, India, here. They go all the way from Karachi on the left into Thailand, China, and down to Calcutta and up to the hump. The hump's in the middle of that picture. January 6th and 7th of 1945. I almost have to read this. A particular fierce winter storm slashed across the mountains, covering the entire 500-mile route to Kunming. Winds exceeded 125 miles an hour. That's the sail winds, or headwinds. Severe turbulence, icing, strong ground reps, and crosswinds up to almost 200 miles an hour. Lightning and monsoon rain. Radio proved virtually useless. The storm caused a loss of at least 14 aircraft and 42 crew. The crew could hear radio calls from planes that were going far away to the north and had no idea where they were until those radios went silent. PLM stands for Production Line Maintenance. In 1945, General Tunnan instituted this. He said air crews have to rest, aircraft don't. Each aircraft would be towed through a series of maintenance stations after each mission prepared for their next flight. After 100 hours, they would have a special check be performed. And on the lower left, you can see is a sketch of sheds they made that they parked the engine so that they were sheltered for the crew, maintenance crew, so they could work in deluge of monsoons or in serious heat in summertime. You could get second-degree burns off of the skin of those airplanes in the summertime. Well, Air Force Day. This is August the 1st, 1945. The India-China wings makes the first push to set a record. They made a flight every 1 minute, 12 seconds, delivering 4 tons every minute. Those crews flew 1,118 round trips, hauling 5,327 tons without a single accident. Major accomplishment. Okay, get ready. Sir, your plane is ready. We're going on flight. While the crew chief sets the load, you take your seat, go over your checklist, start the engine, and pass it out. You circle to gain altitude, then climb eastward out of the valley. You first top the Patkai Range. You then pass over the upper Chinwin River Valley, bounded on the east by 14,000-foot ridge of the Kumar Mountains. You next cross the Salween and Mekong rivers and their towering mountain ranges. You now encounter the main hump, the Sandstone Range, often 15,000 feet high between the Salween and the Mekong River. The mountains drop below 10,000 feet as you move west-east toward Kunming. You approach Kunming. You can see Lake Yan, and that's how a lot of pilots oriented their approach. Pilots would look for that lake when they came in. The Kunming airfield was the primary destination of flights to China. I don't think my time is. You request permission to land from the Kunming Tower. Kunming Control grants you clearance to land. You will join a stack of aircraft several thousand feet high, circling the field at 500-foot intervals. The tower will give you instructions to let you down 500 feet at a time until you reach the final approach. It reach the final approach altitude. You may be doing this in the clouds or a solid fall. Incidentally, that's my dad's airplane ending in China. Destination reach. You notice the operations staff was picking on the wall. You made it again. Good work. This is the crew, Captain Bamboo Joe Ruby and Lieutenant Ernest LaJoy. They're leading the operations staff. This picture came from Life magazine. Now, when they returned to China, medical officers would give them a physical check sometimes if they were on a stressful flight and the weather was bad, and might dispense an ounce of whiskey to use as a sedative before you crawl back into the lake. This is a chart of the altitudes and the basic routes that they flew for the high hump. If you look at top, there's our 5 rivers up there. On the bottom are the actual altitudes of the mountains. I don't know if I don't have my attention. Okay, these mountains down here, you can see this is 14,000, 16,000 feet high. There is only 18 miles here between those two river valleys. That is about 8,500 foot change of elevation in that 18 miles. That's the kind of rough terrain they flew over. When they left India, they were about 300 feet, 6,000 feet in Kundalini. In B-29 bombers came in 44 from the 20th Bomber Squadron. They were intended to fly, set up base in China, and attack Japan. So they had to make 6 flights over the hump, round trips, carrying their own fuel until they were ready to run a mission. They also, FDR promised Chiang Kai-shek bombers, so the 308th Bombardment Group arrived in 43. They flew B-24s. They supported Chiang Kai-shek and the Chinese Army. The hazard of flying the hump, untested and unsafe aircraft is one. C-46 was rushed to the theater with insufficient testing. The C-87 and in particular the C-109 tanker conversion were hard to fly and dangerous. Many pilots were rushed to the CDI theater with inadequate training. Some had never flown a multi-engine plane, would now be in the largest twin-engine aircraft the Army had. And a lot of them from the lower half of the class because the better guys went to combat. Disease, malaria, and other tropical diseases were rampant. Maintenance was a strain. People working on aircraft in searing heat in monsoon days. And the stress of living conditions and lack of recreation, especially for enlisted men, was really hard. Hypoxia. Many pilots in early flights flew without oxygen and exceeded 14,000 feet and simply flew into the ground when they got to China at 6,000 feet because they were confused. Hazards of weather over the hump. The men who hauled gasoline and ammunition over this route flew through the worst weather on Earth, with little weather information available to them. During the monsoon season, they encountered massive thunderstorms with intense lightning, electrical systems, hail, extremely high crosswinds that could twist airplanes and rip off wings. Storms rendered the minimal radio navigation useless, and the extreme turbulence could tumble the gyro-based instruments. The wind weather also made bailing out very dangerous. I'm going to read this. This is a story from Senator Peter Dominic, who flew the hump. June 12th, flew back, and the plane was still sloppy every time we hit the slightest rough air. I've now lost an engine and had one catch fire on takeoff. I've lost one engine empty over top. I lost one loaded over the hump and been going down on instruments at night on the hump. I've overshot the runway on 3 engines this night. I've been chased off a runway on bombing raids. I've flown 700 miles by dead reckoning, no instruments. I've been lost at night in thunderstorms. I've had a plane do its best to try flying on its back at night. I've flown through more thunderstorms than I knew existed, and have been weighed down by ice with a snowstorm in the cockpit. St. Elmo's fire has been all over the plane. I've let down between thunderstorms at 20,000 feet, and yet I've never quite had to bail out. This is St. Elmo's fire. You mentioned that. It's a static discharge. It could be all over the plane. This is in a modern aircraft, by the way, you see right now on the windshield. They would see it on the propellers and everything on the plane itself. St. Elmo's fire. Here's another one that Senator Allen mentions about somebody else. Heller's ship flew into a thunderstorm which was so rough it stilled their gyro instruments. They tried to flat a needle and ball, but they were already in a tight spiral and couldn't get it out. Heller yelled to bail out, and Cariati got up to do so. He lost consciousness before bailing out and came to, falling through the air. He pulled his ripcord and landed okay. Apparently the ship, which was in a tight spiral and it had an indicated airspeed of 300 miles per hour, had hit a pocket of air and torn the wing off the plane. Cariati had, that's how he was thrown out. He didn't have his chute buckled up and was hanging by one arm when he woke up. Nobody knows what happened to the rest of the crew. There's a risk of malaria on the Hump. CBI was a perfect spot to breed mosquitoes. During the monsoon season, here could get 200 inches of water or rain. The Japanese had captured the main source of quinine, which was the preferred malaria medicine. So we used atropine that they had concocted. Atropine pills were taken daily. They had a side effect. One of the major ones, well, the major one was to turn your skin bright yellow. I remember my dad talking about that. Personnel were instructed to sleep under mosquito nets. And General Tunner modified B-25 bombers as skeeter readers. They flew and sprayed ETT around the jungle around these camps. Now we talk about the dangers of walking out. That means on your feet after you bail out and survive a crash. Japanese patrols. Naga headhunters. The Naga headhunters were still hunting heads up until 1960. There were wild animals, Bengal tigers, rogue elephants, poisonous snakes. You could get caught in a 150-foot tree in Burma if you bailed out and never get out of it. Jungle leeches, I remember my father telling me you could get them off with a cigarette. And infections, all kinds of infections in the jungle, bacteria and scratches and stuff. I'm now going to read something. My dad was a crew chief on the C-46 flying the Hump. After the aircraft experienced a problem engine failure, bailout was ordered. Dad climbed out of the overwing escape hatch and jumped. He landed in a tree. He had to get himself down. He never encountered any other crew members on the ground. Using his survival strategy, he hiked downhill until he came to a stream. Then he went downstream a while until he came upon some natives. They led him to their village where they fed him and sheltered him over some time, at least one night. They later led him out on another hike. They may have sent runners ahead because as they encountered another native group coming the other way, Dad joined the second group and they walked him to their village, where they also fed him and sheltered him overnight. This new group led him on another march until they came to a road. They waited there until a U.S. Army truck came riding by and hailed him. Dad boarded the truck, which was headed to an airfield. There he managed to hop a flight back to his home base, Moranberry. After relaying the story to our family, he said, "That was the worst week of my life." A blood check. That is like something you owe somebody, you give them a check. These were silk things made by the nationalist Chinese guys carried them or sewed on their clothing. The translation of the Chinese is, "This foreign American person has come to China to help in the war effort. Soldiers and civilians, one and all, should rescue, protect, and provide him with medical care." You can see one on the back of that jacket those Chinese soldiers are looking at. You can also see a leather jacket in our honor medal that belonged to Jack Hazen. It has a blood chip message painted on the back of it. The accomplishments of the Hump. In the course of 3.5 years, the United States Army Air Force crews delivered over 650,000 tons of material through the worst flying conditions on Earth and kept China from falling. In July of 45, they hauled 77,306 tons of supplies over the rock pile. The India-China Wings Creek month. Aircraft numbers had risen from 25 DC-3s flying only daylight good weather missions to 672 aircraft flying round the clock. Here's statistics of the flights over the Hump. You can see it starts at 43, so it doesn't include 1942. But very little, that we're back in the less than 10,000 stuff on the left side. In 1945, July is the peak. That was the biggest thing. The cost of flying the Hump. At least 590 air transport aircraft, some people say 700, were lost over the Hump. Many crashed and were never found. 1,314 individuals died as a result of these crashes. A total of 1,171 crew members walked out of the rescue. The aluminum tray. Hump transports crashed while challenging the Hump route. So many transports crashed that on a clear day, they called it, you can set it, let me say this again, I won't back up. So many transports crashed flying the hump that they said on a clear day you could find your way from Shavuot to Kunming by looking at the glint of aluminum on the ground. Chick Morris Quinn wrote a book documenting all these, her husband died on there, and she wrote a book called The Aluminum Trail documenting over 600 crashes. There's also a gentleman by the name of Clayton Coos, and his MIS recoveries, they're still going up into the Himalayas recovering crashes today. So far they've recovered 28 airplanes and identified 278 MIA personnel. The legacy of the hump. It proved that mass support by airlift alone is possible if you want to pay the price. It made it possible to use the Berlin airfield in 1948 to 49 to support the citizens of West Berlin during the Soviet blockade. You can see in that picture there, all those children waiting outside the airport in Berlin. Pilots would drop candy to them, they call them candy bombers. It was also the forerunner of the military air transport system. There we go. We're over the hump and back. I invite you to visit our honor gallery. There's a small display about Hump over there. We have Mr. Brinker's uniform over there, his logbook. There's information from Ellis Carson over there. There's a little bit of information about Irv Ryan over there too. Did I do all right, Irv? Yeah, okay. We can have the lights on there. We should have some people. Are we doing the questions, guys? There are people out here. That's what the meaning is. Are we doing questions? I don't have any mics. Anybody out there have mic? Okay, we got some mics now. Does anybody have a question? I see a hand. I saw it. There's a hand up back there.
Where were the cities you were talking about? What country?
Oh, it's all in India.
Okay.
I'll have to say, I was using all the terminology for geography that was from 1940. I may have mentioned Bombay, that's Mumbai. If I said Calcutta, that's Kolkata. This is before the British partitioned India into Bangladesh and Pakistan. They didn't exist then either. I did mention Kunming, which was in China. That was the other side of the hump. So the main flat route was from Shavuot or the 4 or 5 fields around it, over the hump into Kunming, China. There's more planes to take it to there than all other places in China.
Well, I think we have a question over here.
Okay, we got a couple.
One of my questions was, how did the Berlin part fit into the hump?
It taught, the general who ran the Berlin airlift actually was the guy who ran the hump in 1944-45. That's where he learned how to do it. So he was in charge of the Berlin airlift, using the same stuff he learned over the hump to fly under the hump.
Come down to 16 foot, you just control the plane.
Yeah, the C-47 wasn't well equipped to travel the hump. That's why the C-46 was better over the high routes.
What time are you bringing dinner home?
I will have to text you if you want.
Larry, could you tell us more about your dad? Did he tell these stories to you when you were younger or later or what?
The only thing I remember my dad talking about when I was young, I'm the oldest of all these wonderful people sitting there in my family. When he was young, he would tell us about things that happened away from India, or he would tell us a little bit about the people of India. Interesting thing for my dad was, when he got out of grade school, he thought he wanted to be a missionary. He went to Holy Cross Seminary for a year and a half, and he was going to be a missionary to India. Eventually, he and his brothers decided he wasn't really cut out to be a priest, maybe. But where the army sent him? To India. He talked about survival, and I think because of music, that's why he talked to me about that. He talked to me about using cigarettes to get leeches off of them long before I ever heard the story about him being out there. He was 85 when he told us that. We were sitting around the table, and my stepsister sat across the table and said, "Charlie, what did you do in the army?" And he didn't answer. I answered for him, and I said, "He flew the hump." He slapped the table, and then the next words out of his mouth were, "I had to bail out one time." And then he told us that story. Any other questions?
Real quick, you mentioned the air pressure in the cabins in the airplanes and how it's passing out. Was that the precursor of the beginning of pressurized airplanes and all that?
They were probably already working on pressurized airplanes, but those, in fact, the C-46 was intended to be a pressurized airliner when the Army took it away from them and said, "No, we need it now," and that's why it was rushed to the hump. It was unpressurized. Some early flights, they didn't even use oxygen. That's when I said they experienced hypoxia. But they weren't flying a high hump yet. Early on when they flew the hump, they didn't have oxygen masks sometimes. They had a rubber hose with a pipe bit that they clenched in their teeth to get oxygen to them while they flew. Got one down here.
I'm an OB, the World War II expert. Why have I not heard about this particular war?
First of all, it's in the China-Burma-India theater, which is the forgotten theater. There were terrible battles that went on in Burma and India. It was at the extreme limit of our supply chain. A lot of the supplies these guys were supposed to get were taken away from the shipments before they ever got to India. You can read about Merrill's Marauders in Burma. That's a big story. The British fighting in Kohima and Nepal for 2 months, fighting the Japanese. In 2012, they had a debate in England on which was the most significant battle that they won. And the panel said Kohima and Nepal. They didn't say anything about the other battles around the world. But we've not heard of it. It's because we're at the end of the chain and got very little recognition. Everybody knew about, all the news was about the Pacific and about Europe. Did I tell you that combat pilots used to tease the Air Transport Command guys and say AT stood for allergic to combat? I'd like to see some of those guys fly the hump. Incidentally, a lot of you may know Alan Sanderson was a pilot for them, so he passed away a year and 4 months ago. He flew 118 missions in a P-47. He had a German battery punch a hole through his wing where you could only turn left and make slow turns all the way back to his base. I told him that my dad had flew the Hump as a crew chief. He says, "You flew the Hump?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Those poor suckers." This is from a fighter pilot.
Thank you. That was really very informational and heartwarming. I'm just, I'm so confused how we helped China so much, and now how they turned on us.
You know they do. Okay.
I know you can't answer that, but how
Okay. One thing. We were supporting the nationalist Chinese under Chiang Kai-shek. The communists were already there, and they were fighting against the Japanese too. One of the things they sent people to China for was to make sure Chiang Kai-shek wasn't hoarding half his supplies to save them to fight the communists after the war. But eventually the communists won and drove the nationalists out of China. So when we were there, the nationalist Chinese, the Kuomintang, were in charge, and they were friends to us. And even now, the Chinese have monuments to the American flyers who flew over the Hump during the war. They still recognize that effort in China, even the communists.
Hey, Larry, I got a question. Most of the cargo was flown from India into China, correct? I mean,
Correctly, mostly the big part. A lot of it went to Burma later.
So, did they head back, or did they?
No, they would bring things back sometimes. One of the things they did was bring Chinese troops back for training. They would land in Kunming, maybe go to Yunnan, pick up Chinese troops, fill the back of the plane with Chinese troops. Now remember, there's no oxygen back there. And if they came over the high hump, those troops just passed out in the back of the plane. And then when they landed, a lot of times they had gotten sick. They had to clean the plane up. My dad carried a flight of Chinese troops back one time. He said, "We got a head count on the Chinese side. We flew over the hump, and when we landed, we had one less soldier. And the escape hatch was open. They don't know if somebody threw it out, liked his watch, and decided that they were missing one on the other side. But that was quite common to fly Chinese troops back for training. I guess that's about it. Thank you all for listening. Oh, yeah, you have one more question?
Yeah, I was wondering when you were talking about the nationalists, Chinese versus communists, is that when Hong Kong changed hands?
No, that was a different thing. Well, it may have been, yeah, but Hong Kong was a British colony. So Hong Kong belonged to Britain. But nationalist Chinese is what we now call Taiwan. Okay? There was a pilot that took off with a very high tail in a C-54 through an ocean. He couldn't see around and they lost communication. And all of a sudden they broke through the clouds and they saw the ocean in a large island. They had flown all the way across China and were looking at Formosa, which was a Japanese held place. They turned around and managed to make it back to Kunming before they ran out of fuel. You could fly 18 hours in C-54. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy your stay. Take a look at some of the things we had on our garden.